Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome back again to our ever ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. But first, Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, we are continuing with our new series for the month of Kartik, entitled, appropriately, The Binding Rope of Spotless Love. And this will be part 2. I'd like to begin today with a quote from Srila Prabhupada. It's from a lecture he gave in New Vrindavan in America on August 31st, 1972. He said, "We should simply hear about Krishna. We have forgotten Krishna, our Supreme Father, on account of material contamination. But if we hear about him attentively, we will begin to remember him. You have kindly come here to listen to talks about Krishna, so this is a very good opportunity for you. You are all young boys and girls, and you are very fortunate. Your fathers and grandfathers have not come here, but you have come. So just continue hearing about Krishna, and your life will be successful." Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. Now, before we move ahead, I would like to again mention the devotee scholar, poet, Sri Hari Suri, whom we quoted a number of times in the first lecture. I was introduced to this devotional scholar through listening to the lectures of my very dear godbrother, Radha Govinda Maharaj, one of ISKCON's most loved initiating spiritual masters, as well as lectures by Hari Parshad Das, my friend, whom I mentioned in the last lecture, who sits on our GBC Shastric Advisory Committee, and with whom I often consult to make sure the pastimes, the verses, and philosophy that I share in my lectures are all pakka, or all authentic. So I thought it would be appropriate to share some details here about Sri Hari Suri's life and work. Of course, he's not mentioned in the works of our Goswamis, but surely there are many known and unknown Vaishnavas in the annals of time who we can take shelter of if their words and deeds are perfectly, and I say perfectly, in line with ours. In this mood, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to Srimad Bhagavatam 1.1.1, he writes, "Within the past 500 years, many erudite scholars and acharyas like Jiva Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Ballabhacharya, and many other distinguished scholars, even after the time of Lord Chaitanya, made elaborate commentaries on the Bhagavatam. And the serious student would do well to attempt to go through them to better relish the transcendental messages." Unquote. So Hari Suri appeared in the 18th century in Nasik, India, in a Brahmin family belonging to the Kashyapa Gotra. His family members were all initiated in the Naradiya Kirtana Sampradaya of the famous saint Tukaram. Now this Naradiya Kirtana Sampradaya is a sub-branch in the movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the Sampradaya is still existing in the state of Maharashtra, in the western part of India. And Srila Prabhupada says in his introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam that Tukaram, who we mentioned earlier, was initiated by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So our Sri Hari Suri, in his youth, he mastered many branches of the Vedas, such as grammar, Nyaya, Mimamsa, Purana, Itihasa, and especially poetry, Vedic poetry. but he was wholeheartedly attracted to and attached to the Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, the king of all scriptures. In fact, I was reading, he devoted most of his life to studying and commenting on the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where the special emphasis is, as we know, on Braja Lila. Later in his life, scholars have written, Krishna appeared to him in a dream and said, Tat sarvam tava buddhi go charam anayasam karishe lika. It means, or these are Krishna's words, I will manifest the deep meaning of my pastimes in your heart. You please write a commentary on them and express them to the world. So with that instruction, he, Harisuri, wrote a commentary on the first 49 chapters of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and he entitled it Bhakti Rasayanam. Bhakti Rasayanam, meaning the elixir of bhakti. The elixir of bhakti. Now, interestingly enough, it is the only commentary on the Bhagavatam in the form of Sanskrit verses, most of which, I was reading, are extremely cryptic and difficult to decode. But he did this on purpose, so that only a serious reader would take up the task of exploring Krishna Lila in such detail. Serious students. So as he's an accepted authority by my illustrious godbrother, Radha Govinda Maharaj, whom I hold in the highest esteem, as well as an authority for our GBC Shastric Advisory Committee, I will proceed with our discussions on Damodar Lila, quoting Srila Jiva Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, and Harisuri from time to time. So in our previous lecture, we had reached the point in Damodar Lila where Krishna, being frustrated, had broken several pots of yogurt and run away. And upon returning to where she had been feeding Krishna, our dear Mother Yasoda was surprised at what she saw. How do I know this? Because I was reading Gopal Champu by Jiva Goswami. And Srila Jiva Goswami gives us an insight in Gopal Champu, exactly what Mother Yasoda saw. It's short but sweet. He writes that all the yogurt spilled in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj made it look like a festival of yogurt. I thought that was nice. All the yogurt spilled everywhere. It looked like a festival of yogurt. And wanting to know who did that, Mother Yasoda followed the small yogurt marks of the lotus feet of Krishna to wherever they were leading to. And Harisuri writes that Krishna wanted to give actually an important lesson through this pastime. He says that Krishna displayed transcendental kama. We know that word, it means lust, but transcendental kama, lust, with a strong desire to drink the breast milk of his mother. And then he exhibited transcendental anger, krodha. Krodha means anger. Transcendental anger, krodha, when his mother walked away. And Mother Yasoda herself demonstrated transcendental greed, lobha, in her desire to save the boiling milk for her son. So Harisuri writes, all this together created so much chaos and confusion in the house of Mother Yasoda, as we previously discussed. So Harisuri concludes, it's interesting, that if transcendental kama, krodha, and lobha can create such chaos, of course of a transcendental nature, then what to speak of the degraded, perverted reflection of kama, krodha, and lobha in the material world. So he advises us that although we may worship actually the kam, krodha, and lobha of the spiritual world, which ultimately enhances our attraction to Krishna, we should strictly avoid the perverted reflection of kam, krodha, and lobha in the material world. And that we know all too well from Lord Krishna's instruction in Bhagavad Gita. chapter 16, verse 21. Trividam dara kashyadham dvaram nasanam atmanaha kama korastata lobhas tasmad eta trayam tvayat. These are the three gates leading to this hell. Lust, anger, and greed. Every sane man should give these up, for they lead to the degradation of the soul. Now, Harisuri mentions another interesting thing. He says that although there was so much milk and yogurt and so many other, he describes go rasa, cow products, in the home of Mother Yasoda, Krishna was actually only interested in daily consuming butter. He just loved butter. Harisuri writes that butter is the sam, S-A-M, complete sar, or essence of yogurt. Therefore, in Vedic cuisine, butter is often referred to as samsar, the essence of all milk products. Butter is the essence of all milk products, samsar. And he says, there's another important lesson to be learned here. And the lesson is that, he says, although there may be many rasas, or let us say pleasures in this world, an intelligent person should only search after samsar. Again, the complete essence of all these rasas, all these pleasures. And he says, what is that? Bhakti rasa. Loving devotion to Radha and Krishna. Actually, there's no higher taste to be found anywhere in creation or beyond. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 9, describes that as Mother Yasoda was searching for Krishna, he eventually sat down on a turned-over wooden mortar. These mortars are used in Indian culture, Vedic culture, for grinding spices. And as he did so, he was distributing milk products, like yogurt and butter, to the monkeys. Now, because he had stolen these milk products, he was looking all around in great anxiety, thinking that very soon he's going to be chastised by his mother. And sure enough, when Mother Yasoda saw him from a distance, she very cautiously approached him from behind. Now here, Harisuri points out that Krishna was sitting on a ulu kala. Ulu kala means a mortar. The term ulu kala means mortar. However, Harisuri, how could you say, he plays creatively with this term. Because in Sanskrit, ulu kala can also mean a great ruffian. Ulu, great, and kala can mean ruffian. And he writes that in the same way that a sadhu, associating with a kala, a ruffian, never loses his sadhu-like nature. So Krishna, who's the Lord of all sadhus, although associating directly with ulu kala, you can take it as a mortar or associating with big ruffian somewhere, he still exhibits his charitable nature. In this case, by distributing the essence of life for the monkeys, which is butter, which he gave to them. He may be in the material world, fighting the demons, but he's always charitably disposed to the devotees, to everyone actually. He never loses his charitable nature, Krishna, especially as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Srila Prabhupada continues to describe this pastime in chapter 9 of Krishna book. He writes, with great pleasure, I repeat the words of my spiritual master. Mother Yasoda saw Krishna looking this way and that way in fear of her because he was conscious of his naughty behavior. And seeing her son so engaged, she very silently approached him from behind. Krishna, however, saw her coming toward him with a stick in her hand. Now at this point, Jiva Goswami writes again in Gopal Champu that a person who wants to catch a thief has only two eyes, like the policeman's looking for the thief, he only has two eyes. But he writes, A nervous thief has thousands of eyes, in the sense that he's constantly looking in every direction to see if someone is coming to catch him. And this is literally true in the case of baby Krishna. Sometimes Prabhupada would say, our Krishna. He would say like that, our Krishna. How is that literally true? Because Krishna is described in Vedic literature, Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha. Sahasra Shirsha Purusha Sahasraksha. It means he's 1,000-headed and 1,000-eyed as the Purusha Shukta. The Purusha Shukta has thousands of heads and thousands of eyes. That's our Krishna. So sensing, as Purusha Shukta, that his mother was coming, Prabhupada describes Krishna immediately got down from the grinding mortar and began to flee in fear. He's actually running in fear. Krishna's fearful. But wait a minute. How can Krishna experience fear? The Bhagavatam 1.1.14 says, Yad bibeti swayam bhayam. Fear personified, afraid of him. And in the Nrsinga Tapani Upanishad we hear how Krishna, as Lord Nrsingadev, they're non-different, is Ugram Viram Mahavishnum Jwalantam Sarvatolmukam. The fierce, brave, all-pervasive Vishnu who has his face in all directions. So how can such a Lord experience fear? But Gaudiya Vaishnavas, they have a very nice explanation. A very simple but rasic answer to this question is given by Acharyas, and that is that all of Krishna's grandeur, his awe-inspiring personality, exists only on the outside of the borders of Braj. But within Vrindavan, a single display of Mother Yasoda's stick is enough to drive away all those grand qualities. They only exist outside of Braj. Nevertheless, within Vrindavan, a single display of Mother Yasoda's stick, it's enough to drive away all those grand qualities. This is Braj. The Acharyas go on to describe that outside Vrindavan, Krishna may be ugram, fierce, but in this pastime, Damodar Lila, he's become anugram. It means feeble. Elsewhere he may be viram, brave, but in Damodar Lila, in the sweetness of Vrindavan, he becomes aviram, running afraid. Elsewhere he may be Mahavishnu, the all-pervasive Lord, but in Vrindavan he's Avishnu, he's localized as the form of a small boy. As Nrsinga he may be Sarvatolmukam, having his faces in all directions, but in Vrindavan, the Acharya is right, he's even afraid to show his face to Mother Yasoda in this pastime, in this month of Damodar. So I was reading further. Srila Jiva Goswami explains in Bhagavat Sandarbha that the Supreme Lord is complete when he's Viruddha Guna. Krishna is complete when he's Viruddha Guna. It means the Supreme Lord is complete, Viruddha Guna, when the harmonization of opposite qualities exist within himself. Now that's a tongue twister. The harmonization of opposite qualities exist within himself. In other words, Krishna cannot simply be all-pervasive like Vishnu. He also has to be localized like Krishna. He has to be both of those. He has to harmonize these opposites. This is what Krishna does. He harmonizes the opposites. He can't simply be brave all the time. He also has to show some transcendental human weakness. In other words, he has to show a complete range of auspicious qualities, a complete range, in order to be known as Bhagavan, or God. He must have Viruddha Guna, the harmonization of opposite qualities within himself. Now, the same Nrsinga Tapani Upanishad, where we quoted the mantra, Ugram Vira Mahavishnu. This is really interesting. Later says, in this context, Ugram Anu Gram Viram Aviram Mahantam Amahantam Vishnum Avishnum Sarvato Mukham Asarvato Mukham. He is fierce, the Lord is fierce, yet feeble, brave, yet afraid, all-pervasive, yet localized, having his face in all directions, yet not having his face in all directions. These are the contradictory qualities that are harmonized only in Krishna. And therefore our acharyas say that Krishna is the harmonizer of all opposites. We gave so many opposites, but they're all in Krishna, harmonized in his transcendental personality. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki. So Srila Prabhupada goes on to explain in Krishna book. Mother Yasoda chased Krishna to all corners, trying to capture the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was never approached even by the expert meditations of great yogis. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, who was never caught by the yogis and speculators, was playing just like a child for such a great devotee as Mother Yasoda. So here, Hari Suri points out that Krishna was looking in all directions, but very carefully, not in the direction of Mother Yasoda. And what's the reason for that? He writes, Slis yad rosham mano yavat tavad ishta panan mukha. Krishna wanted to show that as long as even a little anger towards me is there in someone's mind, I will never look in that person's direction. This is what Krishna's, the lesson to be learned here. As long as even a little anger towards me is there in anyone's mind, I, Krishna, will never look in that person's direction. So it's important for devotees to know that we should never keep any grudges or misgivings towards Krishna in our hearts, like, why did this happen to me? How can Krishna be so cruel? Why is God? No, we should never think like that. Otherwise, he won't look in our direction, just as he was not looking in the direction of Mother Yasoda. Very interesting perspective here by our acharyas. In other words, we can conclude our bhakti, our devotion for Krishna, should always be as Rupa Goswami describes it, anukulyena, favorably disposed. So Srila Prabhupada continues. Mother Yasoda, however, could not easily catch the fast-running child because of her thin waist and her heavy body. Now, Jiva Goswami says in Gopal Champu that Mother Yasoda was not able to catch Krishna easily. This is very beautiful. Just as a heavy cloud driven by the wind is unable to catch a small cloud driven by the same wind. Transcendental poetry. Just as a heavy cloud driven by the wind is unable to catch a small cloud driven by the same wind. In this way, Mother Yasoda couldn't catch Krishna. Whoa. And he goes on to say that Krishna could not be caught by Mother Yasoda as long as he was looking away. However, as children are, one time he looked around and he saw Mother Yasoda rushing towards him. And what happened? At that moment he froze. And this was the moment that he finally got caught. We're making some progress here. This was the moment that he finally got caught. So, Srila Jiva Goswami goes on to describe so sweetly, and this is my favorite part of the lecture. He describes that as soon as he was caught, all the tears in the world came to his rescue, Krishna. All the tears in the world came to his rescue. I just love that. All the tears in the world came to his rescue because he started crying loudly. And at this point, Hari Suri helps us understand this in a very clear way. He quotes a verse. Durlabhasya bhalam raja charonam anvitam bhalam Balam murkasya mor nitpam balanam rodanam balam. It's so nice to say. Listen to this. A religious king is the strength of those who are weak. Speaking lies is the strength of thieves. Keeping quiet is the strength of fools. And crying loudly is the strength of small children. How so? Well, because when they cry, your heart melts and you come to them for whatever reason. A religious king is the strength of those who are weak. Speaking lies is the strength of thieves. Keeping quiet is the strength of fools. And crying loudly is the strength of small children. So Krishna started crying in order to save himself from any possible chastisement of Mother Yasoda. Whoa. I'm hanging on the edge of my seat. Probably you are too. But we're going to stop here. We're going to stop here. Oh, Krishna. And we'll leave you today with an impression of the Lord in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj's palace. Because he didn't run so far. He's a little toddler. He's still in the courtyard of Nanda Maharaj's palace. And there's a favorite verse of mine from one of my favorite acharyas, Sri Rupa Goswami, from his Padyavali. And I found it's also quoted in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 1996. So beautiful. Those who are afraid of material existence worship the Vedic literature. Some worship Smriti, the corollaries to the Vedic literature, and others worship the Mahabharata. As far as I am concerned, I worship Krishna's father, Maharaj Nanda, in whose courtyard the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, is playing. All glories to Lord Damodar. All glories to Mother Yasoda. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, the revealer of the Dham. So thank you, Prabhus. This is lecture number 2. I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6. I just hope it goes on forever. And surely we'll be back next Friday with more nectar about this month of Kartik, Damodar Mas. Thank you so much. See you soon. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki, Shri Krishna Sankirtan Yagya ki, Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe Shyam.